The ascension of George Pickens as a potential superstar receiver with the Dallas Cowboys, the very glowing comments made by Jerry Jones, the owner of the team, after Monday night's game, that has brought front and center a couple of questions, right? Why didn't he play like that in Pittsburgh? And why? And I know the answer because it leads to the second question. Why aren't they getting the ball to the guy that they're paying $30 million a year to in DK Metcalf? I mean, that's the through line here. They get these great receivers, and it's like they don't know how to get them the ball.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the first question then. So George Pickens, they knew what they were getting into. There were red flags, nothing off the field at Georgia, but obviously the attitude and temperament and all of those things were potential problems. But when you're paying Mike Tomlin $18 to $20 million a year to manage personalities and keep guys in line and be the ultimate player coach, they figure they can get the most out of guys like that. And it worked until it didn't. The issues were your quarterback was never good enough to consistently get the ball to George Pickens. And George isn't one of these guys that's going to grin and bear it. He isn't Larry Fitzgerald. He's the antithesis of somebody like that. When he isn't fed the ball, he's going to pout and he's going to act up. And they really did not have, and this is surprising to maybe people on the outside because of the way Mike Tomlin is revered, they really did not have the support system in place to keep this guy happy and in line. Showing up late for games, including the Christmas game last year where he had a bum hamstring, hadn't played multiple games, needed to test the hamstring pregame, never showed up for pregame, and they had him active anyways because they were so desperate. And then he runs the wrong route on Christmas. It leads to a Russell Wilson interception. They lose the game. So there was tons of frustration. I think when the DK Metcalf trade initially got made, the thought was, well, this is going to make it easier for everyone. DK Metcalf can't get double teamed. George Pickens is not going to be the focus of the defense anymore. This is going to be like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in Cincinnati. It almost doesn't matter who our quarterback is because it's going to make everybody better. And then, Mike, I think what happened was they started to do their sit-down conversations, and Aaron Rodgers got more invested and involved and laid out what he was looking for and wanted before he signed. And I think in those conversations, it became very clear that Aaron Rodgers did not want to deal with the headache that potentially was George Pickens. And I don't know if Aaron Rodgers came flat out and said, get him out of here. I don't want to play with him. But I think those talks led to a decision by the organization to take whatever they could get for George Pickens. And if you can compare and contrast the things that Omar Khan said, say at the NFL scouting combine about those two guys playing together versus what was said after the trade, it seems like it was a very player-driven thing to get Pickens out of here. And the guy who I think really pushed him out the door more than anybody else was the quarterback who did not want to have that kind of brooding, kind of mercurial receiver to deal with and potentially his last year playing football.
And think about the difference then in leadership styles between Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott. The morning the trade happened, Jason Garrett, who was the head coach of the Cowboys when Dak Prescott was first drafted and became a star quarterback, he was on this show and said, hey, George Pickens has never had a great quarterback. George Pickens has never had a great leader as his quarterback. And Dak Prescott hasn't had any issues with George Pickens. Now, something happened that caused Brian Schottenheimer, the coach of the Cowboys, to bench both CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens for the first drive of the game on Monday night. I don't know that that has anything to do with Dak Prescott, but it didn't matter. Dak Prescott got 9 balls that were caught by George Pickens for 144 yards and a touchdown. And you would think that Aaron Rodgers would welcome, for a guy who was constantly trying to get the Packers to get him more help. Like, it doesn't take a genius, which qualifies me to do it, to know that George Pickens has star potential. But if you don't throw him the football, you don't get to see it. So you got Pickens and Metcalf. Now, I thought the moment they gave the money to Metcalf, there's no way Pickens is going to be on the team this year because he's trying to get his money. They're going to be justifying Metcalf's. It's going to be harder for him to get his. But it's kind of sad to think that Aaron Rodgers wouldn't want to have at his disposal 2 great players. And you could argue right now Pickens is better than DK Metcalf.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's second in the league in receiving yards and I think second in touchdowns among wide receivers. So absolutely. He's younger. I mean, DK Metcalf has turned into the most expensive decoy in the entire NFL. He just runs. He gets his cardio in during games. They can't get him the ball anymore because defenses are smart. They just double him up. And there isn't anybody left in the Steelers' offense at wide receiver and tight end that really scares and makes the defense pay for playing the Steelers' offense that way. That's what's led to this stagnation offensively. I think Aaron Rodgers has an inflated sense for how good he is at this point in his career. And I think he believes he can get the most out of inferior players and wants certain types of wide receivers to throw the ball to. One of the things that was, pretty self-evident if you watched any Steelers games last year was that from play to play, George Pickens' effort level was up for debate. His focus and attention to detail, is he going to run the route he's supposed to run on a given play? I mean, these are things that Aaron Rodgers loathes when players kind of do this maybe in an unprofessional manner. Mike, I was at a game last year. The Steelers played at Indianapolis and lost in week 3. And that was the game that Anthony Richardson got knocked out of and Flacco went in. And I was in the press box and I was sitting next to a guy who had basically been in the press box for every George Pickens game. And he said, watch this. I can predict based on how Pickens comes out of the huddle and his body language, if it's going to be a passing play or a rushing play. And I kid you not, he got it right like 21 consecutive times because you could tell that Pickens knew whether or not there was a chance for him to get the ball on a given play. And if he didn't think so, his head was down. He loafed back. He loafed onto the field to his wide receiver spot. And it was crazy. The plays where he thought he would get the ball, his gloves were fastened. He was looking back at the quarterback. His body language was different. And those are the types of things the Steelers had to deal with him. But again, I put some of that on Mike Tomlin. If he is the ultimate players coach, he's got to get guys like that more locked in, and he wasn't able to do that consistently with George.
You want to hear something that may or may not be interesting to you? I was at a game one time, and I noticed a receiver doing the exact same thing. The entire game. I was paying attention, and I noticed it. The demeanor coming out of the huddle. Every play. It wasn't 80%. It was 100%. I knew when the ball was going to him, and I knew when the ball wasn't based upon how he exited the huddle. All the stuff you're saying. Exact same thing. Guess who it was?
Randy Moss.
Exactly. 1998 in Baltimore. Vikings at Ravens. So, and that actually perked me up because I've been saying for years that George Pickens has Randy Moss skills. Yeah. But if you don't use the guy, you don't see them. So what would the natural product be of being with a team who has subpar quarterbacks, less than what you need to be at a high level in the NFL? I don't know. I mean, Kenny Pickett wasn't good enough or he'd still be there. What they've had since then, pre-Aaron Rodgers, wasn't good enough to get him the ball. But if you put Randy Moss in the, if we can get 21-year-old Randy Moss and drop him on the Steelers in 2022, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff. So, it just shows you just like this weird randomness of where a player ends up. You end up with a team that's going to get you the ball on a regular basis and let you showcase your skill set. It goes one way. You end up with a team that's not going to get you the ball when you clearly are talented and can make things happen and can be a game breaker and can get Jerry Jones to gush the way he did. If you don't have a team that can do that, it's going to go the other way. And it went that way with Pickens in Pittsburgh. So I just think that makes for a hell of a compare and contrast as he goes forward with the Cowboys, because it would be crazy to think that the Steelers had like another great receiver, because they've had great receivers, but they cut the cord too early on the guy.
I'm going to give you something that's pretty wild here, Mike. And I think that, Steelers fans have not really had this epiphany or light bulb moment yet. Mason Rudolph and George Pickens played great together 2 years ago at the end of the 2023 season. Go back and look at that Cincinnati game that you guys worked on Christmas Eve. First play of the game, Rudolph throws a touchdown pass to George Pickens. He goes like 80 yards. The game in Seattle that they won against all odds, both teams are fighting for a playoff spot. Game's on the line. Rudolph stands in the pocket, delivers a bomb downfield to Pickens, which essentially wins them the game. Those two guys got along great, swimmingly. When Rudolph was let go, actually, by the team, Pickens and a couple other guys expressed a little bit of disappointment that they had made that decision before knowing who the next quarterback was going to be. I honestly think there's an alternative universe out there where Aaron Rodgers decides to side with Minnesota or another team. The Steelers keep George Pickens, and he's, at least for the time being throughout training camp and the early season, fine with Mason Rudolph as the quarterback. And you've got Rudolph with DK Metcalf and George Pickens. And if George lashes out and eventually, doesn't like his situation here, well, then you could have traded him before the trade deadline. But I do think he would have been on his best behavior initially with Mason Rudolph as the Steelers quarterback, if the Steelers had allowed for that.
It is amazing to think how things could have gone differently with just a little twist or tweak here or there, but it's working out for George Pickens. And hey, every player should have an opportunity to play in a spot where his talents can be utilized, and George Pickens finally has it. All right, Andrew, we appreciate some of your time. As always, Steelers versus Bears this weekend. Check out 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh. Andrew's on every afternoon, and I will invade every Wednesday afternoon for a little while. Thanks again, pal. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, Mike.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.